Hi there. You're listening to The Everglade Chronicles, a reading. I'm Garrett Shave, the author. Good day to you all. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today I will be reading Part 1 of Chapter 4, New Allies, Old Friends. This is a supersized chapter, so I have decided to cut it in half. Maybe I used a samurai sword to do it. Now, let's get started. The folklore and the mysteries of the meadow were becoming clearer to me, like the dissolution of fog in the morning. When I regaled my tales to Jessica, she simply could not believe what she was hearing. Such intrigue, such difference. None of this had happened while she was queen, nor had it happened before her reign. It was like an entirely different story had been written solely by the Dragon Emperor and his quirky court. This new king, this emperor, Jessica mused. He must have an acquired knowledge of ancient Chinese and Japanese history, no less. Do you know how old he is? They say 12. Some say 13. I think he must be at least 13, I answered. If I recall from my grade school years, we covered Japanese history in grade 7. That adds up nicely, I should think. In any case, he hasn't revealed himself to anyone. He is very elusive. He has these kids called the Elite Four who do his bidding for him. Jessica rubbed her chin with interest. So, he is really casting himself as an absolute ruler. I wonder if he learned that from our dear Queen Venus. Is it possible that this Dragon Emperor served under her, or even under me? The possibilities are endless, but his knowledge is even more interesting. He appears to know his role all too well. The internet is a helpful tool too, dear cousin, I admitted. He probably learned a thing or two from there. She laughed. Yes, I had almost forgotten about that. I feel his knowledge has been acquired by experience rather than mindless research online. Next weekend he is declaring the season formally open, I remarked, rising from her bed. Jessica was busy looking at herself in a hanging mirror, listening but doing her hair. I was hoping I would catch a glimpse of him then, but the children who serve me are skeptical. They say he will not show up and force his cronies to do it. Gods are usually heard but not seen, she said frankly. A good ruler knows that presence and example make for loyal citizens. Even Queen Venus, with her infinite flaws and vanity, knew the power of an appearance before a massive crowd. All I know is that his court is very restricted, and very high and mighty. You might compare them to birds in golden cages, sitting on towering pedestals. They are out of our grasp. Nice comparison, she turned and smiled. Do you know what happened to Luke? I avoided her gaze for a moment. He was overrun by the Dragon Emperor, I told her. He was then executed alongside various others, who then left the meadow forever. Jessica nodded, appearing to accept his fate. I see. At least these children still believe in the legacy of Queen Isis. I hope that the memory of Isis gives them strength, even though her chosen heir failed the meadow. Luke has not reached out to me, which is why my curiosity was so piqued. Did you ever have any doubts about Luke? Madison called him mentally weak. Maybe once or twice, she admitted. I thought of him as a capable ruler. I suppose, under perfect circumstances, he might have been able to rule longer. One cannot predict a revolution. It seems to run in Everglade's blood. It's nice to see that Madison still retains her ducal position. This all reminds me of the King of France and his restricted, lavish court at Versailles. I want to infiltrate their ranks and become one of them, or at least see what there is to be seen. However, I am a walker, and I dare say that will restrict me even more than it already has. Logically, she sighed. Considering this Dragon Emperor overthrew my legitimate heir, he doesn't seem to have much respect for the old institution. I told her about my journey to Gaia, the new lost forest, and explained how I had seen Mark. I told her about the princess, too, and her inhuman beauty. Sounds like you've got a crush, Jessica joked. I do not, I said, blushing. She tends to captivate everyone she meets. I see Mark from time to time, but he is quite busy. Madison told me that the children of the meadow begged him to return. They needed rescuing. That is why the Lost Forest moved away and became its own self-governing state. It was always the greatest fear that the Lost Forest would one day rule on its own. Makes perfect sense, though. They were always rebelling, even in my day and the days of King Thomas. There was an old rumor that the Lost Forest had once been its own kingdom, but that was eons ago, she said. I nodded in reply, and Jessica looked over at her clock. Oh, bother. I am sorry to cut this short, Theo, but I simply must run. I have to meet Cora for a walk. That's fine. I shall see you later then, I replied, smiling. Tell her I say hi. After school the following afternoon, I decided to shape my lordship even more. I decided to name Lucille my royal attendant, as Jessica had been to the old Duke of Sunset. Lucille was ecstatic, but Eva seemed let down. I told my new friend Victor that he must guard Cloverleaf and be the sentry. Victor was tall, with dark skin and dark eyes. I asked Garth about the goings-on at the Emperor's Perch, but he seemingly knew nothing. I had placed too much faith in him as a potential liaison with the royal court. Am I able to seek an audience with a member of the Emperor's court? I asked him. I do not think so, my lord, he answered quickly. Such a thing is not possible. Why not? I am hardly familiar with any court members, your grace. I frowned. It seemed that hardly anyone around here knew of any royals besides the Emperor himself, and a few choice others. You might be able to go and see Lord Cameron, Eva piped up. He is the patron of the observatory and takes a vital role in its upkeep. What is he like? Is he on the inside? Yes, I should think so. He wears those fancy robes, like Lord Isaac. I find he is more down to earth, she replied. I only have questions, that is all. If he is of the same rank as me, then it should be no issue. I do not know why some of us are kept away from the main circle, but others are included. Such is the definition of politics, my lord, Garth replied aimlessly. I shall go and see if he will visit, Eva said with a smile. Take Lucille with you. After all, she is my attendant. Eva's smile disappeared, but she obeyed. Now it was only a matter of time. This Lord Cameron was new to me. I had not even heard his name mentioned before. Do you know anything about Lord Cameron? I asked the two lads. Victor nodded. He is older, about 15, I think. Gossip is he's related to an Elite Four. Let us hope he can answer some questions for me, I murmured, rubbing my chin. As luck would have it, Lord Cameron was very inviting. No more than 10 minutes had passed, and already Lucille and Eva were coming back. They told me that the Lord was waiting for me. It would be wise for you to be accompanied by a guard, and myself, your grace, Lucille informed me, placing both hands behind her back, not only for security, but for a show of power. Yes, I suppose I must show off to this Lord Cameron, I mumbled. It will show how well off Cloverleaf is, my lord, Eva remarked. He will tell the Emperor. I nodded. It was certainly a good idea, considering my little lordship was destitute when I arrived. We proceeded across the namesake bridge and marched around to the gravel path. We looked like a little parade, marching single file. The observatory loomed ahead and was oddly guarded. A slim youngster with a pike and helmet stood still in front of the main entryway up to the slide. My master, Lord Theo, is here to see Lord Cameron, Lucille told the guard. He nodded. The Lord of the Observatory will be with you shortly. We waited in the shade of a few elms as the boy named Cameron skidded down the yellow slide. There were a few others gathered here, standing idly and speaking. They must have been scholars. When they noticed Eva, she gave them a wave. They were both boys, roughly the same height. They wore graphic tees and jeans, simple garb for commoners, but their discussion was out of my earshot. The red-headed boy kept giving us wary side glances, while the blond one ignored us entirely. Cameron emerged from the slide and was wearing an oversized blue fleece robe, despite the overly warm temperature. His robe reminded me of Lord Isaac's, and it became aware to me that it was like a uniform for the Emperor's closest nobility. Cameron was a short boy despite his age. He was also very thin, with shaggy blonde hair. His overly large eyes were the color of water, and he had a grand smile on his little face. He must have hit puberty, but there were no signs of blemishes or pimples on his near-porcelain face. One might say he was handsome. Someone else followed him down the slide, however. We all watched in awe as one of the Elite Four slid perfectly out, landing flawlessly on his feet. The two boys who had been watching us with such speculation darted away, like scared rabbits at the sight of the Elite Four. It must have been Fox. His outfit of samurai regalia was yellow and unmissable. I could not help but notice his chain whip hanging from his waist. He, too, had blonde hair, but was considerably taller than the lord. The two looked oddly similar, and the samurai placed both his hands on his hips. His face and head were interestingly exposed to us. "You must be Lord Theo of Cloverleaf," Cameron said warmly. "I am Cameron, the Lord of the Observatory. This is my cousin, Jordan. I meant Fox. I am sure by now you know the Elite Four." Fox bowed deeply, forgiving his cousin's outburst. "Yes, a pleasure to meet you, Fox." "Even more so with yourself, Your Grace," I replied. "Fox and I were discussing matters, that's all. He was just leaving." Fox did not speak. He moved away without a word and then shortly burst into a run and was out of sight in moments. Lord Cameron gestured for us to sit on the city benches beneath the elms. His observatory was not large enough to house us all, but he observed my large party with ease. "My attendant has some lemonade for us," he said. A petite girl slid down the yellow slide, carrying with her a jug of lemonade. The guard boy stepped closer, holding paper cups for us. After she had poured our cups, the girl and my own attendant stood behind the benches. It was not for them to sit with us, given our rank. "Your attendant and one of my scholars tell me you have many questions," Cameron asked. "Yes, I do," I said frankly. "I have learned so little about the Emperor's court lately. I have not even glimpsed the Exalted One. I was told you are one of his inner circle and could give me some insight." Cameron set his empty cup down. It was quickly refilled. He was sitting very close to me, and I could smell his idle teen stench. "I am afraid I am not at liberty to disclose such information, my good friend. We must trust in our Emperor that he is doing the right thing, leading our meadow to great victory and keeping the peace." He nodded. "I can tell you a few things, yes. We who are the inner circle are required to wear these dastardly robes despite the heat. I usually take mine off when I'm inside the slide, but still. The circle is comprised of mostly lords, save Lady Sakura. Not even the Duchess of Sunset is considered his close ally. Does he ever show himself? I understand he is to open the season next weekend. Will he make an appearance then?" "Likely," he replied, sipping at his lemonade, "but he will not speak. He hardly ever speaks." "That is interesting," I said, adjusting my frames. "My cousin told me that during her time it was all mostly open. Kids saw the Queen all the time." Lord Cameron stared at me for a moment. His watery blue eyes were excited like ocean waves. "Rumor has it you are a relation to the last great queen. Is that not so?" "Yes," I said. "Jessica Walker is my cousin. She was Queen Isis." His blue eyes widened suddenly, then went back to normal. I could tell he was largely fascinated. A smile crossed his face. "Yes, so the rumors are true. I came when King Luke ruled this meadow. But that was not very long, you see. I have heard all the tales of your great cousin. How interesting indeed." "This entire meadow mystifies me," I admitted. "I only wish there were more answers than questions, really." Lord Cameron crushed his small paper cup gingerly. "We all wish for more answers, my lord. This is indeed a dark time. I am not even sure if the Emperor is coming or going." "I am glad to have met you, Lord Cameron," I said, rising. "I agreed," he replied. "Shall we form an alliance?" "Yes, I suppose that might be a good idea. What do you propose?" Lord Cameron clapped his hands and signaled for his guard to come over. His attendant stepped out from behind the bench, too. She was as calm and regal as a butler. "The observatory and Cloverleaf are to be intertwined as one," he told his people. "When you are in need, we will help, and vice versa. I have a strong ally in my cousin Fox." "It is agreed, then," I said with a grin. We shook hands happily. Despite afternoon lemonade with Lord Cameron, the machinations of the meadow did not become clearer to me. Lucille apologized. She was certain he would be able to help me out. He seemed to be hypnotized by the propaganda the Dragon Emperor was releasing. "No need to worry," I told her. "Things will become clear soon enough. He appears to be bound by some oath to not speak on the Emperor's accord. How soon, I was not sure. On a Sunday morning, I strolled to the meadow along the birch trail. I stopped at the Bermuda Bridge and noticed a familiar figure. We were all alone except for the few guards who stood near. They were dressed in Gaia gear, and the lone figure on the bridge was Princess Violet. The angel was wearing a sky-blue summer dress with a scattered daisy pattern. Her long blonde hair was in waves, and she had a face of contemplation. She was staring out across the waters as her men stood guard. "Good afternoon, Your Highness," I greeted her happily. Her guards seized up immediately. They surrounded me, poking me with their plastic halberds. Instinctively, I threw my hands into the air. like an apprehended criminal. "Just saying good afternoon," I yelled, frightened. The princess did not care to notice at first, but after I had spoken a second time, she turned to me. She tented her fingers at center and nodded for her guards to release me. Her turquoise eyes were enthralling. "Lord Theo," she murmured, "a pleasure." I sighed deeply, relieved. "Yes, a pleasure, I am sure. How are you? What are you doing here, at this part of the bridge?" "Before everyone arrives, I like to look out over the water from the bridge. It reminds me of home," she said, turning again to the waters. "Where are you from?" I pondered. She kept her eyes on the water. "Nova Scotia." I suddenly had an idea, and it might make her happy and smile. "Your Highness," I said, inching closer, "I am the Lord of Cloverleaf, as you must know. My own lordship is nestled at the far end of the bridge that bears my territory's name. If you do not wish to jeopardize your situation, nor be captured by the Emperor's men, you might take it upon yourself to watch the water from that bridge instead. It is much quieter, and the Emperor's men do not usually come by that way." Princess Violet turned around and a small smile crossed her face. It was so small I hardly noticed it. "You are most kind, young lord," she said. "I shall consider your idea." It warmed my heart to please such a beautiful princess, and I could feel myself blushing. Princess Violet moved a hand up to her mouth and giggled. I made a princess laugh. She turned quickly, forbidding me to see more. "Have a good day, Lord Theodore," she said, walking away slowly. She seemed to glide. As I strolled along the pavement path, I saw how empty the meadow was at this time. I was one of the first kids to walk along here. I felt like I owned the meadow. It was so deathly silent. I crossed my bridge and watched the water as the princess had. I could see her from where I was, strolling along the gravel path slowly. She appeared so distant. 2 guards stood in front of her and 2 in the rear. She walked like a real princess, leisurely and gracefully. She kept her hands at center, tented. Her blonde hair flowed in the light breeze, and I was spellbound. "You're here early, my lord." I was shaken by the voice of Eva, who came from behind. She had a shrill voice when speaking too quickly, I had learned. "Yes," I said suddenly. "You startled me." She could see I was watching the princess. Her eyes were wide. "I haven't seen Princess Violet in ages," Eva said. "She looks as elegant as ever." "Yes, I agree," I mumbled. We both watched her, like an elegant swan out of reach. "Violet is like an endangered animal," Eva whispered. "We never see her. She is elegant and beautiful, the very definition of a princess." Same with Prince Oberon. The pair are elusive. "Certainly they will be invited to the season opening this weekend?" Eva nodded. "More than likely, yes." "Then we shall see them both then," I smiled. I decided to ask Eva about historical records, and she did not seem to have a clue. Apparently a library in history had not been valued as much in this kingdom as the real world. There were no records of any rulers, nor of any battles. The law here seemed natural, or those put in place by the emperor. If you did not start early in the game, you could not possibly know the history of the laws from the past. How could we ever learn from our mistakes? I came to know that history was passed down orally by children known as storytellers. I had assumed that the scholars had been made aware of the meadow's dense history, but I was wrong. It now became crystal clear that the scholars knew nothing of actual importance, and what they did know was propaganda from the Emperor's propaganda department. "Is there no grand scholar who knows all the tales?" I asked her. "For what purpose is this conservatory if you're not going to keep histories? How can you call yourself a scholar?" Eva shook her head. "No, I am sorry, my lord, but I am unaware if that person exists. We all know tales, yes, but naturally we do not know them all. We only know of basic key events that have occurred in the last few seasons." She sighed and adjusted her glasses. "The conservatory is for the study of the sciences, not the keeping of records or history, my lord." I sighed. I was curious to know about rebellion and why the meadow was so rich with it. A great deal of rulers had been overthrown in the meadow, and it seemed that each incoming sovereign was as power-hungry as the last. Perhaps it was because they were not learning from old mistakes. How could we possibly fathom that when our history was not recorded? Then again, I thought about how fickle and unruly children can be. It was a large task to delegate record-keeping to youngsters, a near impossible one at that. "Do you know who came before the infamous Queen Venus?" I asked her. Yes, she replied. That would be King Thomas, who ruled for 2 seasons? He was overthrown by Caitlin Hardy, who chose to call herself Venus. How do you know these things? I asked. The storyteller told me, Eva admitted with a coy smile. Madison, the Duchess. She is the only storyteller left, at least in Everglade. Do you know why Thomas was overthrown? Was he unruly? Was he evil? That, my lord, I do not know. I did not know him personally, she conceded. Perhaps you should ask your cousin, Queen Isis. She will likely know. She will know who came before Thomas, too, I believe. Thank you, Eva. You have been a great help. Hardly, my lord, she bowed. Lucille and I decided to make a short visit to Sunset Town. I had not visited with Madison in a couple of days, and I was interested to see how she was getting on before the grand season opening this coming weekend. As we strolled along the backside, I noticed her tenants hard at work. There was hardly any opulence here. It was really quite a contrast from the supposed wretchedness of the Emperor's Perch. Nothing but hard-working individuals toiling in the imaginary fields around us. The farmers were the best in the game. They had no care for idle politics or royal intrigue. They led simple lives. I saw Madison almost immediately after we cleared a small patch of trees. She had her hands on her hips, dictating work. She was standing in the open field, away from the water. She was wearing a lime green blouse and jeans. Her hair was done into a neat ponytail. Good afternoon, Your Grace, I called with a smile. She turned around and waved at us. I do not know if you've had the pleasure of meeting my royal attendant, Lucille. Lucille bowed deeply. A pleasure to meet you, young mistress, the Duchess replied. She then turned to me. What brings you to my part of the meadow? I just wanted to visit, see how things were going, I admitted. Yes, things have been busy, she answered. We are preparing for a rich and high-yield season. I am very glad for it. Last year was poor. I am sure you are excited for the season formally opening. You will get to glimpse the Dragon Emperor. He is a curious figure, I said. I have spoken with so many, yet have figured out so little. Careful, my lord, the Duchess warned. Curiosity killed the cat, remember? I have always been on alert, Duchess, I replied strongly. What was the worst that could happen? That is the best way to be, my friend, she said. In any case, I feel there is something brewing up at the Emperor's Perch. What it is, I cannot be certain. I have been hearing whispers on the wind. I am sure the answers will become clear, my lady, Lucille said quietly. If it is a war, I am ill prepared, the Duchess half laughed. We would be wiped out in an instant. The oldest remaining institution on the island, smeared off the map. I dare say the Emperor would not attack his own people, I remarked, shocked. He did it before, she answered. When the Exalted One first came, he annihilated all of us. Entire dynasties were purged. Territory went up in smoke. You see, he wanted to install his own people in his new places of power. He has succeeded, hasn't he? I am one of the few who remain. The forest themselves, they separated from us. You must not think so negatively, Your Grace, I said, swallowing hard. This is not a necessary thing right now. The Emperor has peace and prosperity in the meadow. Some dictators do less, even just for fun, the Duchess said coldly. I should know. I lived and toiled under the tyranny of Queen Venus. The faceless Dragon Emperor was indeed an absolute force. Did he want us to think he was unstoppable? It was hardly possible to overthrow a king when he is considered invincible. He was making us believe in his divinity, in his immortal reign. A cunning tactic for such a young boy. We must wait for the season opener, the Duchess broke my thoughts. Only then will we know his true intent for the summer. It is common for rulers to announce their action plans during the opening ceremonies. I am sure not all is revealed, however, I mumbled. No, of course not, she replied starkly. We must take life as it comes. That concludes part 1 of chapter 4. Join me next week for the grand finale. We'll see what the Emperor is truly up to. Have a great week. Dragon Boats by Fass is the music used during this novel on the podcast. Find us online on Facebook and Instagram by searching @Everglade Chronicles. You can find all 3 of the Everglade Chronicles novels exclusively on Amazon. Thank you kindly for your support.